Without further ado, let me introduce a man who is a heart-centered father and conscious co-parent. He's a men's empowerment coach, and he coaches fathers through his program, The Awakened Father. He is the founder of the functional health brand Life is Rare, an impact-driven entrepreneur, as well as an adventure athlete. He's a military veteran and has done the 52 hours no sleep training with Navy SEALs. He consistently pushes past the limits to be a better man, father, and leader. Please welcome Brandon Duncan.
Yay!
Hi.
Hi, Brandon.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on with us. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time, even though it's the Game of Thrones finale.
I know.
I don't know if you watch that, but
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually don't watch it. I was on, or not on, but I was at Jimmy Kimmel. This was,
oh yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, like maybe 4 weeks ago, with, I can't even remember his name now. The main character was,
No, the Jon
Snow
character.
The Jamie Lancaster character.
What's
his? I can't remember his real name though. Anyway, got to meet him. Super cool guy. But yeah, I haven't ever watched it.
Wow.
So I'm not missing it.
Yeah,
we're good.
I don't know. It's not worth. I don't know. Some people will say it's worth it. Some people will say it's not because it kind of like trails off. Like I don't know.
I would would say
you would still watch it.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I love it, but it's just something to fill your head with fantasies. So it depends on the time you have, allocate your time.
Totally. But yeah, thank you guys for having me. Super excited to dive in and have some fun.
Yeah. So tell us your story. What brought you to be the man that you have become and are becoming?
Yeah, it's a big question. I'm from Alabama originally. So grew up, a great childhood. Had an amazing family, and my dad was an entrepreneur and a business owner. He was in the art industry. So I kind of grew up around around that entrepreneurship kind of lifestyle from a young age, and always had this desire to move beyond where I was at. So always was kind of eager to go to the next stage, which ended up leading me to drop out of high school when I turned 18 so that I could hurry up and go to college was the idea. Didn't end up going to college, actually went to the military. That's when I spent 4 years in the Coast Guard, which was an incredible experience. During that time, my younger brother actually passed away on my 23rd birthday. And that was about a year before I actually got out. So I'd had 3 years in the military. And then this final year, I'd made like all these plans and all these ideas of what I was going to do when I got out. And then that happened, which was obviously this major like tragedy that came in and just completely changed everything. I ended up that plan, and being the big brother, or being his big brother, I put on this persona of wanting to protect everyone, wanting to protect my parents, wanting to protect his high school friends. He was a senior in high school. He was 17 when this happened. And during the next few years after this, I was 23 when it happened. But for those next few years, in that kind of story of needing to protect everyone else, I wasn't protecting me. And so that sent me on a journey for many years during my mid-20s of lots of drugs, lots of partying, lots of alcohol, and really anything that I could do to kind of fill that void and sedate from that pain. Bounced around a lot from jobs, like different careers. I was doing real estate for a while. I was selling art for my dad's company for a few years in Atlanta, and just never really found something that made me happy, and was always searching, knowing that there was some type of work that I needed to do to heal this pain, but I just didn't know what that was. And that ended up bringing me out to Portland, Oregon when I was about 28. I had kind of had enough living back home in Alabama, and literally took out a map of the US, just a big map, and closed my eyes and did this thing where I just dropped my finger down on the map and it landed in the Pacific Northwest. So I enrolled in a culinary school and a restaurant management school out here with the intention to go back to school and then open up a restaurant. And moved out here in 2008 and started going to school, and ended up meeting this woman that I fell in love with. And we moved back to Alabama at the end. The school was a short program, a year long. So we moved back to Alabama at the end of that program, and we opened up a restaurant with my dad and started this kind of next chapter in this next journey, which was incredibly rewarding and fulfilling. And I still had not worked on all this pain and all this stuff that was inside of me. And so it started coming back up in other ways. And I ended up getting addicted to prescription pain pills actually while she was 7 months pregnant. The addiction actually started before that, and I hit my rock bottom while she was 7 months pregnant. And everyone found out. Ended up going to a rehab and working through that initial process of getting off of pain medication and kind of healing that initial addiction. And then I became a dad like a month and a half, 2 months after that, which completely changed everything. It was about a month before my 29th birthday. I actually went to 2 rehabs because I ended up relapsing after the first one. And at that same time, my daughter's mom and I decided she was going through a lot. I mean, becoming a new mom and finding this out about me, it was really, really hard on her. And so we decided it was best for her to move back to Portland. And in fact, she moved in the middle of the night, like on her own, to kind of get back and to be with family and just escape the pain and the stuff that she was experiencing. And that really, it woke me up to this, just the reality of some of my choices and actions, not just in that 7 or 8 months, but really like the last 5-6 years since my brother had died. And so we made a decision. I moved back to Portland right after that. And we made a decision then that we were going to focus on being the best parents that we could possibly be, not trying to heal this relationship that we had or anything like that, and just creating this new chapter in life. And that started in a really beautiful, powerful way. I was back out here. This was the end of 2010, the very beginning of 2011, and started like rebuilding after this really challenging stage and also this really beautiful stage of becoming a father. And then 7 months later, my dad passed away. And that just sent me into this just dark depression. And I spent like the next year really not knowing what to do. And I was in dad mode when I had my daughter. And then I was in like depressed, alone mode when I didn't. And I would spend a lot of my time when I didn't have my daughter just searching the internet for answers. I would go buy books, or I would get online and I would just search stuff. And that ended up, I'd been around personal development from like the really well-known, like the Tony Robbins and things like that. I'd like seen the stuff and read some of the stuff. And it appealed to me. And growing up as an athlete, I understood like mindset. I understood certain things, but I had never really adopted anything or practiced anything in this way. And during this time, after my dad passed away, I came across a program called Wake Up Warrior. At the time, actually, it was more just the founder. It was Garrett J. White, and he was starting a program called Wake Up Warrior. And what he was sharing on Facebook and just online, it really resonated with me. And I also viewed him as a father figure in a way. He seemed like he had his shit together, and he had this really attractive life and this really attractive way of presenting himself, and also being like incredibly honest and vulnerable about the dark past that he was coming from. And so I ended up going through this process of starting to align myself with these different mentors and coaches. And I ended up going through his program called Warrior Week down in Laguna Beach, California. And that was in 2013. He challenged me to sign up for an Ironman triathlon, which at the time was this impossible, like, there's no way I can do this thought. And he said, just sign up. And so I did, just taking his advice. I actually grew out my beard for like 9 months and grew out my hair because I wanted to go through this physical change, because I was changing on the inside. And so I wanted this reminder every single morning, when I looked in the mirror, of this change I was going through.
Women do that with hair color.
Yeah. It, that became like the catalyst to start to do a lot of things. It started to teach me certain principles and certain practices and things that I could apply to my life in that moment, that were making small little shifts and small changes. And it started aligning me with really healthy men. And, losing a younger brother, losing my father, and also had a lot of friends that died from drug addiction and different things growing up, and like losing these people that mattered. There is this big void, and not having, I had great friendships, but not having like really powerful, healthy male relationships that would actually hold me accountable. And they would tell me the things that I needed to hear, even if I didn't want to hear them. And that's what Garrett and so many of the men that I actually met inside of Wake Up Warrior were doing for me. And so it started to change me. And I know that like that whole like saying the word transformation, or I was transformed, or any of that, like it's that woo-woo-y, like, okay, whatever. But like it really actually started to change me. Right. But it was because I was doing the work every single day and like ruthlessly committed to these practices and making them a part of my life and embodying them. All the while during this time, investing my love and honor and appreciation into my daughter's mom, and still working on that co-parenting relationship, and having the ups and the downs and the ebbs and the flows that naturally came with that. Being a dad, trying to launch businesses and being a entrepreneur, which was really birthed during this stage of personal development work with Garrett. That's what ended up, I launched a company called Rare Breed, which was my first coaching company. After I'd been a student of Garrett's work and some other coaches for about a year and a half, I kind of organically created a coaching company because old friends were asking me what I was doing and if I could share that. And that birthed this coaching company that, was really successful and really impactful for about 3.5 years. And about 2 years ago, I decided to get into just to shift and evolve again and to launch the supplements and the nutraceuticals that I'm doing now, and brought those to market a while back. And realize that I still have a lot to share and teach to now specifically fathers.
Yeah.
After the journey I've been on for the last 8.5 years.
That's awesome. That's such a you are really good at clearly giving us that storyline, because that's hard. That's a hard question to answer. Tell us your story. So you've thought about it, which is, I think, half of the journey is like really contemplating where you're coming from, why you're reacting to things in your life this way, and knowing your journey. Knowing how you got here is such a big part of that. So thank you for sharing that story. I wanted to. I know, and we're gonna definitely get into everything you're into right now with the conscious parenting and the single fathers that you're, and fathers generally that you're coaching and everything you're doing. But I wanted to ask about, this seemed like there was a repetitive thing going on in your life since you brought us from young childhood essentially all the way up to now, where you say you would go even just Google something, just anything, see what you're interested in and come up across it. And even the way that you kind of just picked a place on the map to move to.
Seeker.
Yeah, you're definitely were seeking. And I was wondering if you come from a religious background or not.
I do not know. Being raised in Alabama, it's a hyper conservative and very religious environment. And that just never really resonated with me. And I always felt this pull to God and spirituality. And I just didn't know a path, to that when I was younger. I started to develop that as I got older, but was not raised in a religious home or anything.
Yeah, I find that's, it seems that people always have an extreme response to spirituality at a young age, whether you've been, formed through a religion that your family brought you up on, or you're seeking and you find your own religion, essentially, your own form of spirituality or how to practice spirituality in your life. So that part of your story was really similar to my story. I think that's why it resonated with me.
That's true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something I'm putting together, why I can appreciate you having your story so well put together is because I'm trying to figure out, what makes me. You live life and you go through day by day, and you don't really take consideration of all these moments, especially the big ones, molding your life into what it is. And I should say, especially the small ones, molding it into, what it's become. But I think it's one of the most, figuring out how to lay that all in line in your head and look at it clearly is a big part of how we grow.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, just to add to that, because I think it's important. One of the big things too that's helped me is actually like sitting down and journaling all this stuff and just writing out, okay, what has my life, like what's been involved in this journey?
Yeah.
Like where have I been and where am I and like where am I wanting to go? Because I mean, I'm incredibly grateful for all the experiences that, some people would label bad, good, whatever. It's not like that to me. I mean, all of these things are really miracles and tragedies, the things that were challenging, because there is a gift inside of all of them. And I think that's a big part, in the process of healing and growing, is actually going inside of somewhat challenging experiences to find the gift. And, in doing that, you start to get really clear about this journey that you've been on, and it then empowers you to actually go somewhere new.
Yeah. And I love that we always, journaling is our favorite thing to pound into people's head on the show.
Journals everywhere.
Well, I've been noticing like people always will stop in some point in their life and like maybe they're giving part of their story to somebody in passing, whatever the conversation happens to turn out, that they went through this and that and the other, and someone goes, wow, you should have a reality TV show, or you should write a book, or someone's thinking back on their life and going, man, I should write a book. My life's crazy. Well, that's what journaling is. You're literally writing a book on your life. I mean, that's essentially your story,
For sure.
in small blurbs, but
I used to, when I would tell my story, Mercedes, remember the acupuncturist story? Like, I would tell it in such chronological order without any emotion, to where I was like, at 5 years old, I was kidnapped. And at 7 years old, I was this. And it was like, there was no emotion behind it, as if I was telling someone else's. And it made it to where I wasn't kind of not giving myself credit for all I'd been through. But also, once I started in my 20s, like really digging into my story, like the emotional side of it, and like digging into the pain and hashing it all out and healing from it. Now, like Mercedes had asked me at dinner a couple months ago, like, what happened with your dad? And the entire time I was like shaking with emotion. So now I'm like finding the balance of being able to articulate things the way that you did. But I did a Huachuma ceremony yesterday, and my best friend Tom today was like, hey, how did it go? And I was like, I cannot explain 70 years to you right now. There's no way. Too much happened. I need to work on my articulation.
But that's a good point, Jade, is that
that's amazing.
Whenever, you're saying when you're trying to tell really, hard part of your story, like you're something that relates to your father, for instance, and you're in that moment, even if you're not able to say the words out loud about it, you feel it in your body and you're shaking or whatever's happening in you, or even when you're trying to articulate it, you're getting those emotions. If we had a regular practice that allowed us to get this stuff out, maybe on paper like journaling or whatever other way you want to do it, would give us, I think, less fear to face those. Every time something else pops up in your life that's really difficult to deal with and you want to just stuff it away, it would give us a regular outlet to get it out sooner so that we don't have to go through such a physical and emotional response when trying to release it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I think.
Yeah, and we have to remember too that emotions are just energy in motion.
Yeah.
And the more that we can move those and express those, and journaling is such a powerful tool to do that. I mean, every time I sit down with pen and paper and write about something, it's easier to then talk about it because I've already started to move some of those emotions.
For sure. Yeah. It's like weird. I never want to journal. It's not like you're going to just want to journal. It's like you have to be in a place where you're like, all right, I gotta get this out of me. And then you do it and you're like, why don't I do this all the time? I'm always pissed that I don't do it even more often.
So, Brandon, you've been such a great example for me as I've made this transition into single parenthood, especially because a huge goal of it is to have a conscious co-parenting partnership with my children's father. And you've really opened my eyes so much to what I could do better to make that happen. And what are some tips that you can give our listeners that are raising kids in separate homes? First, when it comes to the other parent, and then secondly, when it comes to the child or children.
Yeah, for sure. I actually made some notes about this because it's such a big area that needs a lot of attention, and there's a lot to it. The first thing that I'll say is have kindness and patience for yourself. A lot of times, we get so wound up in thinking that we need something to change overnight that, and if it's not changing overnight, the experience, then, it's not going to change ever. And so just remembering that these things take time, that we're rewiring old beliefs and patterns and conditioning that, depending on how long a relationship may have lasted or how long this experience has been going previously, it could be years and years and years. And so it takes time. And then to get into some of the really specific stuff about it, the first thing that I would recommend is deciding, sitting down, going back to journaling, sitting down with a journal and a pen and, closing your eyes and breathing and really connecting to your heart and thinking about what does your most ideal co-parenting world look like? If you could wave a magic wand and have any type of really healthy, loving, exciting experience as a co-parent, what does that look like? Because then from that place, you can start to pull out the details, the small little details and the traits and the characteristics and the habits and the practices. And you can start to make a list and get really clear because this process will actually make it more real and possible to then create it. And it's kind of the roadmap idea because you have to know where you're going to actually get there. You have to kind of know the way to get there. And so this process just creates clarity. It gets you really connected to what does that even look like in, an ideal world. Yeah. From here, I would say start to practice. And this isn't to imply that someone hasn't been practicing this. So for the people that maybe are practicing this, I would say just go deeper, but practice radical honesty and vulnerability. So often in these parenting relationships like this, we have an ego and we're still operating from the relationship instead of from the parenting or the co-parenting. And so we have to separate that. There has to be a divide, and you have to separate what the relationship used to be and step into this new place. And the new place of conscious co-parenting involves radical honesty and vulnerability. Dropping the ego and remembering ultimately that both parents want the same thing. They want healthy children that thrive, and they want to be great parents. And so in that place, you can start to actually show up as your most real and most authentic self. The next thing is huge. And I think that this actually changes. This may be one of the most important first steps, because what it does psychologically, it changes everything. It's stop calling your former lover your ex. I talk about this a lot on some of the stuff I share on social media. The label or term ex implies separation. It divides, and it doesn't have, it's a negative label. It doesn't have anything positive attached to it. So instead, view this person and call this person as your co-parenting partner. The term partner implies partnership. It implies team. And co-parenting involves that you're co-creating this experience together. And so just that subtle change in just a label that a lot of people would never think of.
Take instead of X. Is that what you refer to?
I say
I usually say my children's father.
Yeah, and you can do that too. And I would invite you and others to consider, so what are you avoiding? Like by saying my children's father, that's not necessarily unhealthy at all. And like, where can you take that? Like what would be, so if that's above X, like what's maybe higher, and how healthy can you place and view this person? Because as we all know, the labels and the names that we give people determine how we view those people. And so that's really what this is about. It's positioning ourselves to be viewing, this person as that highest version of themselves in the parenting world, in the co-parenting world. And so
I really do like that. I mean, words hold so much power, and more power than people give them credit. So I think taking out the word X, I mean, X just sounds bad immediately.
Yeah,
totally.
True.
I like
that. You could say former partner. There's other versions of this. This is what's worked for me. This is what feels really good for me.
Co sounds like you're cooperating. I mean, like it's a positive right off the bat, where even former still feels a little more separating, or something in the distant past, or it's some other way of separating as well.
Yeah, I have business partners and investors. I call those people co-founders. I call those people partners. We may not get along at times. We may not agree on things. And we understand we're working toward the same common goal in life, in business. And so that's really what that is.
You're almost manifesting for them when speaking about them. Yeah.
And cool. We have to remember, we can't change the other person. We can change ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's in changing ourselves that the other person changes.
Yeah, and change the perspective of how you see the other person, because really it's only affecting you at the end of the day. Your reality is the only one that matters. So if you see them as your nasty ex, then they're going to be your nasty ex. But if you can envision them into your fabulous co-parent until they are that.
Totally. And there's that part of envisioning or meditating and manifesting this in the mind. It's really where everything starts. And this is jumping ahead, and so I'll keep it short. But part of what I teach in one of my programs is a lot of people focus on results. And when we focus just on results, people are told to typically just change an action. And so we'll talk about this in parenting. If that's the case, you may spend a lot of time and energy focusing on changing an action, such as the way you communicate. And that can create a certain amount of change in the results. Typically, it's not sustainable because you didn't change the belief that's before the choice and the decision in the action that creates the result. And so there's this whole process, and it goes into like the terminology and the labels we use, and it's beliefs, thoughts, and feelings determine choices and decisions. Every choice and decision creates an action, and every action creates a result. And so if we really want to change the experience or the result, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, to the beliefs and the thoughts and the feelings. And that's where, the envisioning practice can become so powerful.
And that rigorous,
the meditating practice on this type of stuff.
I was just going to say, the rigorous authenticity you're talking about. I mean, that is the core of whatever reason you're labeling someone a certain way, or whatever reason you're believing they are or aren't going to show up in a certain way. So, yeah.
Yeah, this next part, it can be really challenging for some people. And so what I recommend is, even as you listen to this and you think about it, is just detach from any judgments and any current, things that you may have attached to your co-parenting partner, and just be open to this idea. And it's to express your love, honor, and appreciation for them as the parent that you're blessed to raise your kids with. The reality is, you would never have your children in your life if this person wasn't here, wasn't part of this relationship. And so that alone, that fact alone is enough to create some level of love, some level of honor, and some level of appreciation for this person. And so when we can detach from all the other shit and just focus on that as a starting point, and then express that to them. And depending on the current health of communication, if a phone call or an in-person isn't the most ideal, then send an email. We have all of these amazing ways we can communicate that are indirect, don't involve a sit down or a face-to-face.
So an emotionally sober setting, whatever that is.
Totally. Yeah. Send an email simply expressing your appreciation to this individual, to this person, completely unattached from what they're going to say in return or their reply, because it's not about that. This is about you showing up as your highest self and honoring them for what they've done. They've helped you create your children.
I don't even have kids, and this sounds so hard.
It can be hard, but the crazy thing is, once you start to do it, and I did this, I wasn't in a place, this was our relationship, Katie and I this was probably 3.5 years in when I started doing this actively, like consciously. Prior to that, we would express appreciation in other ways occasionally. And even for me at this time, it was challenging. And we had like we had our challenges and our issues that we still needed to work through. And I did it over email, and I did it every day for 7 days straight. And I picked something new. And so like, if you really want to dive in and make something shift, like you can create some type of commitment where, maybe it's once a week, maybe it's every couple of days, and you send something new. And again, this isn't about them. It's about you.
Gratitude practice. Yeah.
It's gratitude practice. Yeah. And I even go a step further, because gratitude implies that there's something in return, that it's a two-way channel, right? Where appreciation is simply like unattached from anything in return. Totally. It's simply, I appreciate you. This is me showing that and expressing that. That's it. And it can start small. Like, people can tiptoe into this stuff. And again, depending on their personal experience. And like Jade, since you asked the question too, like wherever you're currently at in all of this, just sharing like what feels good in that moment and taking small steps and remembering that this takes time and consistent practice and patience, which we all know can be a challenging thing at times.
I feel, and I'm totally saying this from, like, mind you, I don't have kids. I'm not in this actual situation, but just right now, me trying to put myself in the shoes of a parent who, has a ex or a co-parent who I'm trying to repair something with, but has done all these shitty things, or maybe they cheated on me, or, like all these reasons that you might not be together anymore, right? And in that circumstance, my ego self, my, small self is going, if you give appreciation or send love, and that they have now the power, because you're opening up, a super vulnerable place for you to do that, where they can not accept it in the way that your ego, your small self wants them to accept it. And so that makes it, that's what makes it hard. I mean, that's the whole part that makes it hard, is that your small self doesn't want to get hurt more by this person who's already hurt you super deeply.
I completely understand that. That's such a valid viewpoint. And that brings up for me the idea of forgiveness. Like when we're forgiving, who's that really for? Is it for the person we're saying it to, or is it for me, right? Like if I'm saying, hey, I forgive you for whatever this experience was, ultimately it's for you. This is the same thing. It's rewiring and repatterning your heart, your mind, your soul to show up as your highest self, and to learn how to hold this individual, not for the things that they may have done, or not for the parts of them that are below their highest self. It's positioning them in the highest place you can, which, as we talk about, we change our perspective. The things that we look at change. Right. And so it's hard, and it's incredibly rewarding.
So it's about surrendering the outcome. I mean, it's massively
surrendering. You have to
leave.
Can you give us
on the table
an example of like just one of the emails that you sent, like how you worded it?
Yeah, it's in an old email account that I don't know. I'd have to pull it up. Yeah, I'd be happy to pull it up. But an example would be just in an email. Hey, Katie. Actually, the first one that I sent her, I actually told her what I was doing. Because again, this was a commitment that I committed to. Okay. So I said, hey, and I don't remember the exact words, but I said, hey, I'm going to be sending you an email every day for the next 7 days. I'm not expecting you to reply. In fact, there's no, you don't have to reply, and don't even think. This is for me just to simply share some things that are on my heart about us as parents and about our child, like something to that effect, making it about the experience as parents and not former partners in a relationship. Yeah. And then I think I went into it. I just said, I appreciate, and again, focusing on the 3 words, like that's kind of key. Use that as a framework: love, honor, and appreciation. You don't have to say all 3, but I went through the practice of actually using all of them. And I would say something to the effect of, I love that I have the opportunity to share in our daughter with you, and like that I get to raise a incredible young lady alongside you. I love that. And I appreciate you as a woman and as a mother. I appreciate the incredible love and nurturing spirit that you give our daughter. It means the world to me. I honor who you are and the path that you're living. I understand that there are things that I may not agree with or I may not understand, and I acknowledge you for who you are, and I honor you unconditionally. Like, and then that's it. Like say, you could end it with like, thank you for being a great mother to our child, Brandon.
I love that.
It could be super short, And again, it depends on where people are too.
Right.
And I remember each day when I would send the next one, I would go into really specific stuff, and it could be something like, I appreciate how strong you were when you were giving birth to our daughter. And in that place of pain and challenge and discomfort, you were an incredibly strong woman. And I honor that. I love how you show up at birthdays, or I love how you show up when our daughter really needs your love. It could be anything. And you go through, and again, depending on where someone is and kind of the current health of the relationship, it could start really small. It could be something just as like, hey, I just want you to know that I appreciate you being our kid's father, because without you, I wouldn't be the mother that I am.
Right.
I wouldn't have that opportunity. So I just wanted, it's fact.
Yeah.
I just wanted, it's detached from emotion. I just wanted to let you know that I'm saying thank you.
Right. And
That's
it's
it.
genuine because it's fact, So if you can at least start there, that's a good place, I think.
And how about tips when it comes to the children?
Yeah, well, and going just to add something there, read nonviolent communication. And I actually have.
I read about half.
Yeah, like this book is really powerful. The fact is, and I mean, unless you're like a communication, like you've studied communication for most of your life and you teach it and you're in that world, most people don't have a lot of tools when it comes to navigating really challenging communication stuff,
right.
with when there's a lot of emotion and thing attached to that. So we have to learn these things. And the only way that we learn them is by either reading, talking to other people who have studied these things. We have to seek the information, right? And we then have to apply it. So reading something like nonviolent communication, so you can start to equip yourself with tools in that communication process. And then for the children, and just to clarify, this question specifically is in creating the co-parenting relationship, or in like how to go through
like some tips you can give when it comes to raising kids in separate homes, really.
Sure.
Yeah,
that's a great question. The first thing that I would say is having a really healthy conversation with your co-parenting partner to understand what both the home environments look like. And this is important, to not have a conversation of trying to change the other person's home environment. It's a conversation to create clarity, because from that place of clarity, you can start to align the home environments to where they're more similar than, not similar, because that's going to create disruption. If they're really, really different, the child's going to experience a lot of disruption in between the two homes, and that can create a lot of challenges. So obviously there's a lot of things that are going to be very challenging to have similar, simply because the two people may live very different lives.
It seems to me the most difficult thing getting to sit down and do that and have a productive conversation is cooperation outside and above the part of each other, parent to parent, wanting to hurt each other because of the shit that's between them.
And some people broke up because they didn't agree on how to parent. So now to say, something like that can be tough for some people. Yeah.
It can be hard. And that's, why I preface it with trying to ask in a way of just simply creating some clarity. And you could preface the conversation or the ask in such a way where it says, hey, I'm open to modifying some things in our home, such as bedtime or morning routine, or different things that may be more in alignment with the way you're doing things at your home. Do you mind sharing with me what a normal day looks like, or what maybe your daily, what the kids' schedule may be? Because I would like to actually consider adopting some of that for our home. So you can create this really where it's more of you're asking for them to give you advice, for them to give you something of value that they're doing, instead of saying it in a way where, because immediately a lot of times
you're shitting all over them.
Shitting. Or shitting.
Yeah.
Or shitting. If you're judging them, that's what, a lot of times people, again, depending on the current health of the relationship, if you approach them with that, they're going to think that you're going to start judging them and trying to control them. And so that's where you have to avoid. And that's why, going back to nonviolent communication and certain tools and tactics that can be really beneficial. So I think depending on the situation, just thinking about, what's a really gentle, non-invasive way that you can ask a question like that. The goal here is to find out for the children, one of the biggest obstacles is when the children are experiencing radically different home lives, right? So the goal isn't to change the other person so much. It's to what life looks like for the child when they're not with you. Because from that place, you'll be able to find a couple things that you may be able to do at your home, but without making massive changes, right? Because it could be something as simple as the bedtime. It could be something as simple as like a morning thing that they do. Now, if the other parent just completely doesn't have any awareness to this stuff and like isn't on a schedule and doesn't have any kind of mindfulness when it comes to this stuff, then maybe you start somewhere different. Maybe it's looking at something that's a little bit more structured and rigid, like school, like the time that they have to be at school and the time that they get picked up from school. And you could ask a question like that, and say, hey, do you mind letting me know, what time do you guys typically arrive to school every morning? I'd like to actually drop off little Johnny at the same time so that there's some consistency there. So if he needs to be at school at 8:30, are you getting there right at 8:30 every morning? Like, you can play with this and figure out, but again, the goal is trying to find some small tweaks and some small shifts that will align more of the home environment between the two homes, because that's going to keep some consistency and some structure for the kids.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure this all comes into play when you coach fathers in your program, The Awakened Father. What are some of the core pillars in that program?
Yeah, we have a lot that we teach and we practice. The program itself is a really heart-opening, soul-aligning journey. And so part of those pillars, as far as the practices, are meditation, journaling, reading, studying. We have practices that connect to source and spirit, being very vulnerable. And some of the pillars, and this is coming from stuff that I was taught in Wake Up Warrior and other programs and other coaches. So I just want to acknowledge that this is not a lot of stuff that I created necessarily myself. It's been repackaged and redesigned in my journey. But, heart, like the pillars, it's these 4 pillars of heart, mind, relationships, career. It's the idea of a chair, right? It has to have 4 legs. If you remove one, the chair is going to fall when you sit. And so the idea is every man has these 4 pillars in their life. They can be called things, in Wake Up Warrior, it's called the body, the being, the balance, and the business. Other programs, it's faith, family, fitness, finance. And the idea is that we do certain work and certain practices and teach certain principles in each area, which allow for you to have this fully optimized life, versus what a lot of fathers have is they may be really good in one area and then other areas are shit. And they're slacking because they're not investing any time and energy into those areas.
So you're in Austin, Texas, correct?
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
You're in Portland.
I was visiting Austin, recently.
Okay,
with
this is how Jade knows you
a
from
group down there. Yeah.
Okay. So Portland, Oregon is maybe even a better example of men that are really willing, a big group of men that are really willing to get into that spiritual side and tap into that whole, I want to call it more of the feminine energy, more of a balanced energy maybe is a better way to say it. Do you find that that's one of your biggest obstacles when doing this program, is getting people to getting the men you work with specifically to tap into that side of themselves?
It can be. With coaching now for about 4.5 years, what I've created now is really attracting clients and men that are more like me. And so a lot of them have already started doing some work in their life. And, I get to choose now who I work with in that way. And so although there can be times where, a man has not tapped into his feminine side or is really, really stuck in this like unhealthy, like alpha driven work mode.
Yeah.
And hasn't like learned how to like relax and surrender and open and that. So that can be present, but it just depends. Ultimately, most of the men, I would say actually all the men now that are coming into starting this are, if they haven't started to open in that way and access some of that, they do really quickly because they're ready.
Because they're coming into a program called The Awakened Father, so they have a little bit in mind of what they're going to mean.
Yeah, and they're fed up enough with all the other stuff that hasn't been working, and the pain that they're experiencing, that they're ready to start making some changes.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to talk a little bit about conscious masculinity versus toxic masculinity. And I've heard you speak on this on other podcasts before, and I think you have a lot of great stuff to say about it. It's an area that when I, mention it in any way, shape, or form, or us on the Majic Hour mention it, on social media especially, where there's not always the most mindful or conscious individuals commenting, but it's a place where we get a lot of flack because the people we've spoken to about toxic masculinity have usually been women on this show. So, and Jade and I have large male followings who are like just pissed about feeling like they're being shit on by the feminist movement, really. And I think there is a lot of that in there. So from a man's perspective, who's done a lot of work and thought a lot about this area, maybe you could help to define and explain where we are in that journey as a whole, especially here in America and our culture, as far as conscious masculinity, what that is, toxic masculinity, and how you define that, and where we are right now in that transition.
Yeah, absolutely. This is another big one. So I'll first say that I want to acknowledge both men and women for the experience they're having, and actually especially women right now, because there's a lot going on. And I think that it's very important that we are bringing awareness to some of this. Mm-hmm. It's very needed right now. And my opinion here may be a little intense for some people, especially women. And so I ask just to have some patience and actually hear it out here, because I think if you do, there's some value. I don't believe there's such thing as toxic masculinity. I believe that what people call toxic masculinity is actually a lack of masculinity. I believe it's toxic behavior, and that masculinity is actually extremely healthy. It's divine. It's the same as feminine energy. It's a pure divine energy. It's godlike, and God can't be toxic. Source can't be toxic. And so what we're experiencing is actually a lack of masculinity. I mean, the same can be said for what people would call toxic feminism. Mm-hmm. It's not that feminism is beautiful. Right. It can be so beautiful and so empowering. But the lack of it, that can sometimes, not always, but that can create toxic behavior. And so I invite people to change perhaps a little bit of the viewpoint and start to look at it as, well, masculinity is when a man has matured and when a man has started to embody certain practices and certain levels of emotional, mental, and spiritual maturity, that they are now fully activated and optimized as a man. And John Eldredge, and actually but writes from a very different viewpoint, has a book called Wild at Heart that talks about this journey.
I read the female version.
Yeah, it's powerful. And it talks about, as men, we go through these different stages in life. We have the young boy, the cowboy, the warrior, the lover, the king, the sage. And often what happens for men is they get stuck in a stage. And this is usually the cowboy or the warrior stage, which is like high school, college, into like maybe your early 30s and career. And whether it's a trauma, whether it's a heartbreak, whatever it may be, they get stuck in a certain stage. And so their emotional maturity stops. It stays at that stage, so their chronological age will continue. But they've stopped emotionally maturing because there is this hard line there that cut that off. And David Deida talks about this a lot in his books, The Way of the Superior Man, which I absolutely recommend, any men that are listening to grab that book. It's powerful, and it talks about the necessary polarity, that's required between the feminine and the masculine for there to be romance and attraction and passion. But my belief is ultimately that, if masculinity is presence, then that man is healthy, loving, kind. He's patient, he's strong, he's compassionate, he's understanding, and he's embracing the feminine in its fullest form. And you see this when you see a woman who's able to surrender into her feminine, and she's able to be free and expressive and creative and allow that to flow fully. It's because she's being loved by the masculine. The absence of that, may be a man that's not toxic. It doesn't necessarily mean that when masculinity is not present, that it's automatically toxic. Right. It simply means that that person hasn't embodied that yet. So, you could have, like, the other version could simply be a man who is still a healthy man, but he's not fully stepped into that role and matured to that level where he's embodying like his divine masculinity. And then you just have toxic behavior. And toxic behavior, the conditions for that, at least, are from unresolved pain and trauma that's simply being expressed outwardly. And so that's my viewpoint.
Why do you think we don't step fully into the balance, the yin yang, or masculine, feminine, alpha, omega, whatever the balance you want to call it? What is it that you see holding back people regularly?
Well, I think there's a lot. So I'll focus on men for that. And, we all know, like, what are men taught from a very, very young age? What are men taught to do with their feelings and their emotions? To suppress them.
Never cry. Get up. Yeah.
So that's the best thing that as a mother I can do for my son to raise him into a conscious conscious man that has a healthy balance of his masculine would be to invite all of his emotions and things.
Feel his feelings.
Yeah.
Our emotions are here for a reason. The moment.
Because I thought of that, like when we had this question, I thought of that, like, what can I do for soul? And that seems like something I already do, that one thing. But I was just trying to think of other ways that I could raise him into someone who's...
But also, and I think mothers are much better at saying this as a broad, statement and stereotyping statement here, but are much better at allowing their children, be it boy or girl, to feel their feelings. But of course, your son is going to go out in the world, and other people are going to influence him, and he's going to feel ashamed because someone.
Well, I was thinking that imbalance might come from a father not being present for most men.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right, and I think it's also what's happening is you have grown men who never healed their child trauma, right? And you have grown men that never experienced love from their father. You have grown men that were told not to show their emotion, that they were weak, or that they wouldn't succeed in life, or to suck it up. You've had grown men that have literally kinked the hose in every area of their life because they haven't allowed these things to flow freely. And so then that's showing up, in grown fathers trying to raise sons to be the same thing that you want, Jade, right? They want their sons to be healthy, strong, to fall in love, to live a happy, meaningful life. It's simply their programming and their way of doing it is coming from a place of unhealed and unresolved pain and trauma. And so there's less of an awareness to the impact that's happening in that day-to-day parenting model. And so it's really, I believe it has to go into healing them first so that then they can parent and teach from this new place. Because what happens when we heal anything? Like we feel it, right? It changes us. And we no longer carry that pain and trauma. And just that alone and the activation that comes from that can change a father or a mother. It can change anyone to now start to parent from that place. So they're not teaching their children to be like them. Because that's the worst thing that we can do as parents is imprint our children with our pain and trauma so they continue repeating the same mistakes and experiencing the same pain that we have.
Yeah, I would add to that idea, which, to give a shout out to someone you got us turned on to, Shefali. Yeah, Tasbury, am I saying that right? Right, The Awakened Family, you got the book right there, or The Conscious Parent. I mean, she's written some amazing stuff. That idea of healing those wounds in you will allow your child to have safe space to heal the wounds that they need to heal. And maybe to go back or to see it from the eyes of a parent who is so worried about creating the wounds in the first place. Being a single parent and knowing that there's going to be rifts, there's going to be disruption in their lives and these things that they're going to create wounds from. To instead of worry about healing and fixing the wounds, put the focus on, of course, healing the wounds in themselves, like you're saying, but also making sure there's safe space by the way that you conduct yourself around your child or with your co-parent to allow them places to hold or to feel their feelings, essentially, and to go through and manage those wounds the same way that, you're hopefully being a light to them and showing them the way to do that as they go and grow.
Absolutely. And something to add, going back to that applies here with what you're asking, Jade, about some techniques to create the co-parenting or in the co-parenting with the kids specifically is, as a parent, practicing patience and presence. Like those two things, if you bring daily attention simply and energy to the idea of patience and presence, that can change everything. Because I promise you, when you're fully practicing those two things, you're going to be there for your children. You're going to be able to acknowledge that they're in a state where they need to express some feelings or some pain. You're going to be able to consciously have a conversation with your co-parenting partner, even if it's hard, because you're being patient and you're being present. And so that's a very, very powerful tool and practice to have in all of these different, topic areas that we're talking about.
Yeah. So one of the things I try to say is I am a patient, present, and playful mother, the 3 Ps. But I was curious, this is going to make me sound like a dick, I think.
Yes,
I don't know.
let's hear it.
So the ceremony last night was with all women, and it was amazing because we worked a lot with the masculine and the feminine energy. But around the fire afterwards, we were talking about, and so it's not just me, I thought that it was, but we were all talking about how, and I'm trying to articulate this right, we were talking about how with masculine energy that especially when I'm ovulating, like I see men like you and Kyle and Christian, and I'm like, rah, masculine energy. I want it, But it's weird that there's plenty of men that I know that are very healthy in their masculine and very conscious men that may be lanky or just built, lean. And I don't get that like pull. And I'm wondering, is that something, I was wondering if that was something that was conditioned in me, or if that's like something our culture has like put in us, like conditioned us in, or what the heck, it doesn't seem healthy. And I will say it's typically when I'm ovulating, and I know when you're ovulating, you seek for a man to like make you feel safe, and, you're producing eggs. So you want someone who's like, I don't know. What are your thoughts? Does that make sense? I'm trying to articulate it right.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand
It
exactly.
does.
Okay, I'm glad. I'm just.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I hear is that as a woman, you're finding yourself that there's a certain, like you could have a masculine, what you would consider maybe an entry-level masculine man, or like a version of a masculine man in your life that's super healthy and embodies a lot of that. And then you have like this full or fully whole masculine man who is embodying all of it. Right. And like those are two ends of the spectrum of masculinity, the same as femininity. And that for you and a lot of women who are truly like when they are in their most relaxed, true state, they operate in their divine feminine. Typically speaking, those women are going to be most attracted to in every single way, not just sexually or romantically, but most attracted to men that are fully operating in their divine masculine, not men that may be in their masculine, but like dance in their feminine quite a bit. Because ultimately what that feminine woman wants is to be able to trust that she can surrender into her truest self, and that man can guide her to places she can't take herself. And so like when you're ovulating and you've got, like you said, there's this probably primal pull to a man that you feel like would be a man you can mate with, and a man that can protect you, and a man that can take care of you, and a man that can love you, and a man that can ravish you, and a man that can allow you to simply relax into your truest, most divine feminine self. And for other women, it may not be that. They may operate more in their masculine, and that may be the place that they choose to spend a lot of their time, where it makes them happy. And so for them, they may find what you talk about with a man that isn't as masculine, because you have to have that polarity. It doesn't matter if it's a heterosexual relationship, a homosexual relationship. There always has to be polarity. There always has to be two different poles that create that attraction.
Yeah.
Magnets.
Does that make sense, Mercedes?
Yeah.
I don't know. It made me feel superficial for some reason.
I don't think at all. I mean, I think it's, first of all, you're in this different phase of your life, being newly single mother, and trying to navigate this whole phase that you maybe didn't think you were going to need to come into, with now a new perspective, because you're a totally different person than when you were single last time around, So no, I don't think so. I think it's a really good example of reflect the fact that you're really reflecting on this and trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense with everything like that you have going on in your life, Jade.
Okay. So entrepreneurship from a heart-centered approach is one of your passions. How does that show up in your life?
Yeah, it's, well, a lot of ways. I mean, I love to create. I'm a dreamer, visionary kind of guy. I have a lot of ideas, and my mind's constantly, and I also want to make an impact. I care about people, and I want to add value to the world. And so entrepreneurship just became the path. Conscious entrepreneurship to me really just means, like in its most simple form and definition, is to create products and services that add value and add impact, and to do things that are improving the world and the people's lives that I get to work with. It's solving big problems, is another way to look at it. Finding pain, any type of pain in the marketplace, pain in someone's life, pain in the world, and, creating solutions to that pain.
And is this where Thrive comes in?
Thrive. Yeah, Thrive can come in. I mean, Thrive is, I have restaurants that I'm involved with, co-founder of restaurants in a restaurant and a cafe in Alabama. The reason why we created the restaurant, and the reason why I wanted to, was to really create a space. It's in an old house. It's a historic home called the Rock House. And I wanted to create a space where people could come sit around a dinner table, friends, family, and eat great food, have great wine, and talk and laugh and connect. Because ultimately that's what I value a lot in my life, is to be able to do that with a tribe or with people that I care about. And so, that was one way of creating, like through entrepreneurship, this experience. And then in the coaching, it was kind of the next phase was coaching. and that was to share these gifts that I was given from my mentors and my coaches and empower other people to make certain changes for the better in their life. And then that just naturally evolved into these products that I was creating in my own life as an athlete, as a dad, and just somebody that wants to be really healthy. Thrive became the first product, which started as a green smoothie in my kitchen that I was making, every single day to start my day, and just eventually turned into this physical product that I was able to bring to the world.
That's awesome. I like how it when it just evolves naturally like that, and it's a little piece of your life you're already passionate about, just lend it out to the rest of the world. So actually with that, if you've listened to the show, we do these magic tricks at the end of the show where Jade and I describe some sort of tool or practice to our listeners that they can take and try for the week or for the rest of their life, hopefully. So I was wondering, and even though you've already shared a couple key tricks with us today, maybe you have a practice or a tool that you can share with us and our listeners.
Yeah, definitely. They're probably going to get pissed off when I say this, but it works really, really well. Cold showers. Cold showers for me, there's a lot of like science behind what it does in a lot of ways I'm not going to get because I'm not super educated in that part of it. So study Wim Hof, or you can research that online and find some of the amazing benefits. For me, it simply changes my state. It's an energy and emotion shift. Mm-hmm. And so I like to take a cold shower in the morning, and that way it wakes me up. It gets me excited. It gets energy and stuff flowing. And anytime I'm ever in a really like stressed state, or if I'm in a bad mood and I haven't like been able to change it with some other stuff, I'll hop in a cold shower for 3 minutes. And when I get out, I feel like a completely new person. It quite literally shifts the energetic state and emotional state that I was in, because when you're in that cold shower, you can't really think of anything else except breathing through that cold shower, and then there's again tons of other stuff that I'll let people kind of look at on their own.
Yeah, there's so much research and science around it already, and it's been a valuable trick in our house. I don't do it very often. My husband is like a diehard ice bather, cold shower person. Unfortunately, in California, SoCal, where we're at, it's not really the water's not really cold enough in the summertime to like spike some sort of, adrenaline. But I think like you were saying before about, motion before emotion. It's the same idea with really cold water, or something that shocks your system a little bit. It actually makes all of your, juices start flowing, essentially. It gets all of that junk moving so that you can expel it one way or another through breath often, or whatever way you're going to get it out of your body. But that's one of those things that kind of startles your system into action. For sure.
And then there's one more to share that we talked about earlier, but this is probably like the superpower trick for me. And it's journaling. It's going back to just the simple process of journaling. And I look at like a pen. I don't have one here by me, but like a pen is a weapon of mass creation, and like the journal, it's where it's the birthplace of every idea, every dream, every success, starts when we like sit down and we just write out these things. It can also be, the early stage of healing something within is, maybe the first time you've ever shared some painful thing or hard thing you experienced is in a notebook.
Yeah.
Is just simply writing it in a notebook, and that can start that process. So I would say that, it's up there with some of the top, if not the top magic trick or just powerful daily habit that I consistently rely on.
I love that. Yeah. It's so powerful to get the words that are in your head outside of your body so you can see them. And even if it's something you don't want anyone else to know right now, you're not ready to be that vulnerable, burn the page after writing, but at least you get it out and you watch it burn. It might even be a therapy there.
Totally. Yeah.
I love that.
Before we ask our question from our Magic Mob, I wanted you to mention your relationship with your daughter's stepfather. I'm not sure if you use that term, but I saw him post, because you reposted it, that you guys were hanging out and you guys made like a 4-step plan for the near future, and also him talking about how like you came into the gym and they were like, whoa, he's super hot, that must be hard for you, So I wanted you to mention y'all's relationship, just because that is really rare. And since this is airing on Father's Day week, on Mother's Day week, we had my children's father's other
baby mama
children's mother on, and we're really,
your
really
co-baby
close.
Mama. Yeah, I don't know how to figure that out.
We're really close, and we do a lot of work, spiritual work together and stuff like that. So it's not the norm, though, that type of relationship, especially the one that you guys coming up with this 4-step plan and all that. So I wanted you to just mention that if you're okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to really acknowledge and honor him, his name's Mike Van Tassel. He owns an amazing training gym here in town called The House. And Mike and I actually knew each other before he and Katie ever met. He trained me in between some early triathlons I did back in 2014 and 2015 at the gym I was going to. And then fast forward, they ended up meeting, and he and I actually, before they ever went on a date, he and I sat down and we went to lunch together, actually at a Whole Foods, and talked before they ever went out. So we started this in a really unique place because we knew each other before they met. And so that created, and he's an extremely healthy, conscious, great guy as well. And that has absolutely helped this process. But, for us, we realized that there's a lot here that we get to do together. And, there's going to be challenges and there's going to be some obstacles along the way. And the best thing to do is to get on the same page early and to create some really healthy communication practices and, a really healthy really healthy relationship soon, as early as possible, so that when the challenges and the obstacles come, we're prepared to navigate through those. And so for us, part of that has been communication. I mean, we've had conversations where there's been emotion flowing and some really hard stuff expressed. So that vulnerability piece is huge, in which, if any of them have watched the new thing with Brene Brown on Netflix, it's about vulnerability is courage. So be fucking courageous, and have some courage, because that's where the magic is. And through that, Mike and I, we realized, not just decided, but realized that, we're co-raising women. We are co-raising daughters, my daughter, our daughter, and my influence in his daughter. My daughter just had a baby sister born. She's 4 months old, and I'm active in her life. And we all spend time together. And so he and I realized, we are co-raising these young ladies.
And suddenly it's more of a tribal effort instead of some separated thing.
Yeah. And we choose to view this as an obligation and responsibility as well. And so he actually came up with the idea to meet once a week at his gym. We've been talking about some different things that we could start to do, and he created this idea, and we've been meeting the past few weeks. And as you saw, Jade, I have it pulled up here on Instagram. Part of those things is we wanted to plan an overnight trip for he and I, and this is just an opportunity for the two of us to connect. Something like camping somewhere and just going to sitting around a fire and having a couple beers and just camping and just connecting and talking about life and about what's going on. And then planning a day activity for the two of us with our daughters, and then the final piece was figuring out solutions to make sure both of our homes breed and encourage a family-like atmosphere. All of this comes from communication. And to go back to what you said, stepfather, there's still times where that comes out, but I've been calling him just kind of organically dad number 2. He's her dad just as much, and impacting her in ways that the cool thing that I won't be able to. There's things that he's going to be able to teach her and give her that I won't be able to, because he's lived a different life, different experience, different knowledge. And that's beautiful.
Yeah. We mentioned something like that in another episode, where in some tribes it was common for the female, this is before science came out about it only takes, one specific sperm that impregnates the egg, but there was belief that it was needed that the whole tribe of men basically put their sperm into one woman for her pregnancy to carry through and for the baby to happen and all that. And so they all didn't know who the father was, essentially.
Oh, wow.
So all the tribe's men taught the child, accepted the child just like it was their own, and they, the best storyteller would relay that trait, the best hunter would relay that trait to the child.
Wow.
So, you get all these amazing benefits from having more people, more love in your life. So I think it's a really beautiful
It's from the book Sapiens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have that book. I haven't read the book yet, though. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I might also just mention, I think it's worth saying out loud, there is no normal.
Right.
That's something that's really hard for me to, that was hard for me to get over in a lot of ways in my life. And maybe that's why I feel like I need to say it out loud to anyone who has that hold back in their life. They feel like other people's opinions hold some sort of weight in the way that they live their lives or the choices they choose. The fact of the matter is there is no normal. Even the person who looks like the most cookie cutter, picket fence, whatever the situation in your mind, what normal means to you, still has all their own baggage and shit that is not normal, quote unquote, right? I mean, it's all up to the domestications that make each and every one of us who we are, and the combined domestications of the partners we choose or the tribe we choose. So let go of the idea of normal. Like, that might be one of the hugest steps you can do to allowing more love in your life, a better tribe, increasing the consciousness around you and your child and such.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
So we have a question from the Magic Mob. Jessica on Instagram says, I have 3 kids under the age of 5, and they are so confused right now due to my recent divorce. Their father is an alcoholic and may struggle from a personality disorder, but is in denial of both. You never know which side of him you're going to get, and the darker side can be really scary. I can't stress enough, though, how great the other side is. My kids adore him, but the sad thing is that in order to protect them from the traits I've listed, they also have to miss out on all the amazing parts that we love about him. After time with him, they are easily angered, yell at each other, and just seem off. They miss him daily, so how can I help them understand and gracefully navigate through this difficult time?
And this is from who, Jessica? Okay, awesome. Jessica, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing this. So there's a lot here, and any time there's things like mental or emotional challenges, especially like an addiction or a personality disorder, I always recommend that's a bigger issue. Those are a lot bigger than conversations or techniques or things that we could talk about in just a few minutes. With that being said, going back to what we talked about earlier, expressing love and appreciation in a non-attached way for the highest version of who he is. So, when you talk about in here, Jessica, the side of him that you really love, and these traits that, the amazing parts of him that you love about him, try your best to hold him in that light and express those parts of him to him. Appreciate those parts of him to him. What we know that we appreciates, it grows, it expands. And so I would start there, and in a really gentle way, try to have a conversation, but get his permission to talk about it, because we can never force someone that has an alcoholic or drug addiction. We can never force that conversation on them. And that's typically what happens. We don't even realize we're forcing it. So using language like, are you open to discussing this? Or, may we have a conversation together about this? Things like that, where you can invite in this conversation to at least not tell him your judgment or your views, tell him the children's, because that's the part that's going to speak to him, not what your views are as his former wife or the co-parenting parent in this. It's going to be the children. And so if you can invite in that conversation and he will be willing to have that, I would share really specifics that you put here about not just that they're easily angered or that they yell at each other. Be as specific as possible. What were they angry about? What did they say when they yelled at each other? When they seem off, describe that in detail, and do it with what we call that compliment sandwich, where again, you compliment his greatness first. You compliment and appreciate the amazing parts of him. And then with his permission, share what's going on with the kids, reminding him that he, intends to be the best father that he can be to them, and that he intends to love them as much as possible and to nurture them and protect them. And then share this and, thank him and acknowledge him, because it's likely that he's going through a lot of pain, and he's simply doing the best that he can with the tools that he has. He doesn't know how to heal that pain or express himself in a healthy way, which does not give him permission to act this way. But that would be my first suggestion. And, if there is a personality disorder or a really dangerous alcohol addiction, that's different. And, at a certain point, you have to protect your children. You have to protect yourself and potentially bring in, you could try a therapist. You could try, if there's something to that level, stronger solutions. Yeah, measures to take that again are more of a protecting than trying to bring in like a healthier experience.
And what would how about how she speaks to the kids about this situation?
Yeah, that's a big one. And I know that we've talked, Jade, some about things like that, like with communicating to children. be honest at the age that they're able to receive the honesty. And what I mean by that is there's a limit to honesty if they're not old enough or mature enough to understand it. You don't want to tell them something just because it's honest if they don't know how to comprehend it or understand it because of their emotional intelligence at whatever age they may be.
Yeah. So she says they're 3 under the age of 5. They say, why doesn't Papa live here? Why can't we all live together?
So I would,
I miss him. Yeah.
I would say to the why does Papa not live here? Or why can we not live together? Again, starting it with something positive, saying, hey, so-and-so, Papa loves you and I love you. And, Papa and I are going through some things right now that we are trying to make some positive changes with and create a healthier environment for you guys. And part of that is Papa's going to have his own house and we're going to have our house. And guess what? You get to have 2 houses instead of 1. Most kids only have 1 house, but you're going to get to have 2 houses. That is double the stuff, love, double the play, double the adventure. And, I'll try to come over to Papa's house occasionally, and Papa will try to come over here occasionally. And any questions that you have, please bring them to me and talk to me about it, because it's really important that you feel comfortable and you're experiencing the love and the happiness that's here for you. So and that's just a quick, I understand there could be a lot of emotion in this and a lot of other things going on there. So I would first maybe journal this, maybe write down the conversation you want to have, knowing what the kids have asked, move and express some of that. And just reminding them that their dad loves them, you love them, and that, the dad's trying to be the best dad that he can be. And part of that right now means living in a different home so that he can work through some things to be a healthier, better version of himself, or a healthier, better dad. Again, use language and words that meet them where they're at, and being honest, but not, never speaking ill of the other person, even if they're abusive, or if they're doing things that are horrible. Don't speak in a negative way.
Yeah, that was something you really helped me with, is even though I didn't realize it was negative, I was saying in the beginning, Mama and Papa don't get along. We're fighting too much. And I don't want you to have to be around fighting. So we're going to live in different homes. And I had no idea that what I was saying was what was even coming out negative until I said it to you. And you said, that then he's going to kind of walk around thinking Mama and Papa are fighting. And, at such a young age, that can also make him feel responsible in a way. Completely.
And again, you were doing the best in that moment, that you could do, right? That's what we're always doing with the tools, the information we have. And we have to remember that what we're telling our children is what we're teaching our children. And so if we're telling them something that may be negative, and using language like fighting or arguing, really we're teaching them to fight and to argue. We're teaching them that that's what Mama and Papa do. We're teaching them that that's what grown-ups and parents do, because ultimately they're seeing and learning from you or the parent how to parent. Until they're old enough that they're now spending time around their friends' parents, then they're going to start learning a little bit of what they see there as well. But we have to remember that these interactions, these small moments, we're teaching more than anything. We are teachers. And so that if we can adopt that mindset, it kind of shifts that approach a little bit, and we can start to remember, okay, well, maybe I'll just change the language a little bit. That's all. It's not being dishonest, because I don't believe in hiding and being dishonest, but being honest at the level at which they can comprehend the honesty, and in a way that's also not damaging or negative, So you don't have to tell. How old are your kids again, Jade?
Mine are 3 and 4.
So you don't have to tell them right now that you guys are fighting. It's not dishonest to leave that out, right? Because they're not old enough to understand that.
Yeah.
And so, but telling them what they are old enough to understand in a very honest way, and doing it in a positive light of hey, Dad's getting a new house so he can become a healthier dad. And we have this space for us so we can have our little family here. And, we're going to make sure that the two of you have this beautiful life where you get to have 2 homes. And, we're going to work on being better friends. Even saying that, you're being honest by implying that you may not be, but you're not saying it in a way where it's hey, Dad and I aren't friends. You're saying Dad and I are working to be better friends. And just a subtle change like that, to a child could be a huge
Yeah.
Yeah, getting really clear and honest about your goals, maybe on paper, like you're saying first, and then that being what you relay most to the kid. I remember when, I grew up in a divorced family, and they would be like, well, you're going to get 2 Christmases. And, when you're a kid, you let that feel like, oh, yeah, that's cool. And then, but I mean, it was all, it was bullshit. I was like, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
When are you guys
Yeah.
getting back together? It was always like,
Yeah.
what are you doing with this other person? This person is not right for you. And I mean, I was a very young child, but I remember feeling like that. So again, like trying to hide what's really going on is just not going to happen. Kids know,
Kids know. Yeah. And I just thought of like, cause my daughter asks, I mean, she's 8.5 now, and she's asked when she was younger and then now. And I tell her, I say, look, your mom and I love each other so much. And our love is what created you. And we realized that for us to be the best parents that we can be, that we decided we're going to focus on being just that, parents. And again, this is what she's getting at like 7 and 8,
Right.
that we're going to be parents and really good friends and not be what she calls boyfriend, girlfriend, because that mommy and daddy weren't the best at that.
Right.
But we're the best at this.
We need a Disney movie to explain this better. Right now, it's like
Yeah.
always, some picket fence family situation or some love story.
Totally.
So I do think that you have a really good point there about focusing on the goals. And I'd say from my own personal experience being a child of divorce. Oh, did we lose Jade? Can you still hear me? We lost Jade.
I can hear you.
Okay, let me see if I can pick her back up before I go on. Okay, I'm dialing her. Let's see. Oh, her thing says unavailable. What happened? Dialing her again. Give me a second.
Okay.
No, I hope her computer didn't die or something.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. It may be, our computer may have died. Is that you, Jade? Yeah, I can hear you.
Let me see. I'm trying to add her. Let her know. I don't hear her.
Mercedes is trying to add you. I don't think she can hear you.
Tell her to hang up on that one, maybe. There you go.
What were you saying, Mercedes, to tell her?
Oh, she can hear you because you're on Zencaster with her. I'm trying to re-Skype her.
Jade, she's trying to re-Skype you. Okay, Mercedes, she's hanging up, so you can call her back.
She probably thinks that my camera died, but it's because she can hear you on Zencaster, but not at the fun joys of doing this, not studio.
She said, Jade says she just got a call for a second. Maybe a call was coming through. Did you just try to call her?
I'm trying right now again.
Sorry, guys. Okay.
Oh, there it is.
That was weird. You could hear us because Zencaster was, you could hear him because Zencaster was going, but we lost you on the Skype.
Sorry. Okay. All right. So
are you
can I ask the
recording
next
still
question,
good?
or are y'all done?
Let me just finish my thought since we were in the middle of it. I don't know how that's going to piece out. So my experience of being in a divorced family or being the child of a divorce, the question I have is when one of the parents still has like a want to be with the other parent or romantic, wants to still be in a romantic relationship with the other parent, or maybe still has sexual attraction to the other parent, whatever the thing is, how do you navigate through that, depending on which side you're on as the parent? And also, as a child, I can say that was something of my experience. It wasn't my parents were really good about never talking trash on each other, like ever. Maybe now in their elder years, they tell me all the truthful shit they were feeling then. But when I was a kid, I never had them like saying something bad about each other. But I do think, one was more still interested in keeping that connection. They wish that it never would have ended up that way and always have held that in mind. So that was hard.
Yeah, that's another big question, and there's a lot there and a lot of different experiences that people may be in. So I don't think there's a cookie cutter like answer to it. What I would say, because I experienced that for the first, probably the first 3 years of becoming. We ended the romantic relationship when our daughter was 2 months pregnant, or 2 months old, 3 months old, and started this co-parenting relationship. And for the first probably 3.5 years, all I wanted was to be in a relationship with my daughter's mom. And I've been single, technically been single for 8.5 years, since her. I've dated a lot, but like never gone past that 3-4 month period with someone. For the first 3 or 4 years was because of Katie. And I was still heavily in this state of a few things. One was being in love with the idea of what we once were. Like that was a big piece. The second part is being in love with the idea of what I thought we could be. And those are two very different things. And that kind of I created this self manipulation that tricked me and prevented me from, opening my heart to anyone else. And it took a while. It took a couple years to really get through that and kind of shift that and evolve that. And really, for me, what happened, and I think that for a lot of people, that can be their truth as well, is that they're not actually still in love with the person. They're either in love with the previous version of what the relationship was at its prime, at its like most ultimate state, or they're in love with the idea of what they thought it could have been.
Yeah.
Right.
In love with what they think love is, which is this like egoic thing that's happening in front of them and not really deep inside of them necessarily.
Sure. So I think the first thing, just to like, if there's anyone listening that's going through something like that, is sit down and get really honest with yourself and, ask yourself these hard questions and figure out what it is. And if those, well, then you get to do some really beautiful inner work, and that's just detaching from these ideas. And if it's not one of those and you really are like still in love with this person, you still get to do some inner work. It's just going to look a little bit differently. And I don't know if I have a like specific answer with that, other than, if that person is in a new relationship, honoring and respecting that relationship first and foremost, always staying in a place of integrity. And, if there, because I do think there's situations where maybe there is an opportunity for two people. And so, I don't want to say to let go of that love if that opportunity is still there. There's some ways you have to explore that though, and I think that you would know if that is possible or not.
Yeah.
So
in that time,
in integrity, they know.
Right. In that time and space, too. Like, again, there is no normal. If you decide, you know what, I'm completely separated from what's the romantic side of this relationship I thought was supposed to look like, okay, I can separate myself from that now because that's not in the cards. It's not what I want right now with that person who they are currently. But I do think, of course, people change. I hope they change vastly, especially over several years of time. And especially if they are seeking actively for, or self-discovering actively. So why couldn't they potentially have a chance to be back together at a future date when things align properly? It just might not have been the right time. And not to bank on that or anything. Allow it to happen if it does, but don't completely say, I would never, people say, I would never go backwards. It's like, you're not going backwards because you both are changing forward in the future. Yeah, you're not the same.
And one of the healthiest, best ways to heal over a broken heart or over a relationship, or divorce or anything, when you may still have feelings or a desire to be with that person, the absolute best, most effective way to heal is to work on yourself, to work on personal development, and you start being a better version of yourself and start growing in all areas of life. And that's going to take you to a happier, healthier place that a lot of times will pull you out of that heartbreak, and you'll be able to view that person as like this amazing light that was in your life and honor them now that the relationship is over, and be open to receive new love from someone that's more
brought out
more alignment.
Things in you that needed to be healed.
Completely. Yeah. So there's a lot that we could probably dive in with that kind of stuff, but I think those are some good starting points for people to think about.
So we have a Pick Your Poison from Renato. We do Pick Your Poisons on every show. Would you rather donate your body to science or donate your organs to people who need them?
So I can feel a little bit of emotion coming up, and so I'll pause for a minute and just take a deep breath. So my answer would absolutely be to people that need them. So going back to the beginning of the show, my younger brother, whose birthday was just a couple days ago, the one that passed away, his name was Cody Duncan. He would have been 33 on the 13th of May. He was an organ donor, and a man received his heart among other organs and things. And I got to meet this man. And the first time that I met him was at the awards day for my little brother's senior class. What would have been like right before his graduation. And my family decided to give out some scholarships for some kids. And this gentleman that received his heart was a former principal, and he ended up coming to this awards day. And we got to meet him. And I remember walking into this area where he was, and there's a lot of people around him, and they saw me coming, and they kind of opened and made this path. And I didn't stick my hand out to shake his hand. I just walked up, and he opened his arms, and I put my ear against his chest, and I listened to my little brother's heartbeat in this man's body. And it was hands down down, I mean, next to seeing like my daughter be born, it was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. And this man got to live for an additional 11 years. He got to see great grandchildren born. He got to do some really amazing things. And I got to take my daughter to meet him when she was about 3.5 years old. And she got to sit in his lap and do the same thing, put her ear up to his chest and listen to, you know, her uncle's heartbeat in this man's body. So for me, it would absolutely be being an organ donor.
That makes sense. Now we're all in tears.
Yeah.
What about you, Jade?
That would be my answer too. I've had so many friends that have donated kidneys to strangers and things like that, and their stories. And also there's that famous YouTube video of that kid that got a kidney, and he's telling the other kid that needs a kidney. He's like, hang in there, buddy. I know someone will give you one. And I cry every time I watch it. So it would definitely be to people who needs it.
I think either way is obviously crazy, honorable, and there's not really a wrong answer here. That's why it's a pick your poison, I guess. I'm going to go with science just because it's boring when we all go the same way. So, but science, because, I mean, as much as you're changing the people's lives who your organs serve, I suppose depending on what your body gets used for in science, or really no matter what it gets used for, it's testing likely for something that's going to help us all in the future to some degree or another. You know, maybe it'll save lives just in the same way, in a different sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they're all needed.
Yeah, it's all needed. Either way, donate it, whatever you do. So there's a few short questions that we like to ask everyone who comes on the show. Cool. First off, if you could hug your younger self right now, what would you say?
Wow. The first thing that comes up to me is I love you.
Did your younger self really need to hear that?
Oh, yeah. That was one of the biggest, a lack of self-love, which is why I was seeking it from others. The validation and the approval of others was because I wasn't expressing it or practicing it to myself.
What age would you go back to say that? Approximately.
Probably somewhere around 18, 19, maybe 17. Yeah, so somewhere around like toward the end of high school.
Yeah. It's a very transitional time for sure.
Yeah.
So many people's opinions seem to matter so much in those whole years, like weigh so heavily on just, it feels like when somebody has something terrible to say or you have something terrible to say about yourself, that it's literally the end of the world, it feels like, in that time.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to get past.
For sure.
If you could have the whole world read one book, which would it be?
Wow, that's another big one. I mean, the whole world, I have it next to me because I was going to mention this book.
You've picked up 2 different books. How many are next to you?
I have probably 30 or 40 books within like arm's reach. This one, it was actually given to me. So it's really interesting. It was given to me the first time after one of my first plant medicine ceremonies by the facilitator. He sent me a copy and told me that if there was one book that he could give his son, that it would be this book. And then my mother gave me the copy that I'm going to show here. And she marked a section of the book, and my father read her this passage on their wedding night. And so the book is The Prophet by Khalil Gibran.
Jade loves that one.
That Tom, who is like an older male figure in my life, that was the first book he gifted me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, there's some amazing books that I could recommend. This one, though, because I believe it applies to both, you know, males and females, and like both the masculine and the feminine. It could apply to children, younger people, older people. And it's really impacted my life. And it's shown up in like so many different beautiful ways in my life that it's definitely at the top.
I have it already downloaded. I just haven't pushed play yet on it. So I'll get there.
Yeah, I love, I listen to most books. This is one I would recommend after you listen to it. But buy the books too, so you can have it, because it's a great one just to open up sometimes to any page.
It looks like, from what I've heard of Jay talking about it, it seems like one to read in the bathtub, you know, like really.
Sure. Yeah. Very relaxed and no expectations. Just have fun.
Yeah. All right. If you could whisper one phrase to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
That's a good question. So I have this, it's going to go back to the other one, but I have this big design of a massive back tattoo. I'm pretty heavily tattooed, and my back is the next kind of big piece. And part of it was inspired by an experience that I had at Burning Man. And the experience was, you know, when someone's looking at you from behind, they have this opportunity to see parts of you that you can't see. And so it's like, what are we showing that person? And what am I showing that person and expressing to that person? And so as part of this back tattoo, I wanted to have a hidden message that when people see me with my shirt off, that it reminds them of something. And so it goes back to what I said I would share to my younger self, and it's just a different version of that, and it would say, you are loved. And so that's the statement I would share to everyone, is just to remember that you are loved.
I love that. Brandon, before we let you go, where can people find you and your work?
At Facebook and Instagram. Instagram is, I think it's Brandon like _James_Duncan, or Brandon James Duncan, something like that. But just type in Brandon James Duncan. Facebook is the same, Brandon James Duncan. And our website is lifeisrare.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
I want to say
you, ladies.
that you sharing with us today all about conscious parenting, all about how to navigate this really tough thing of being a parent, period, whether, you're a single parent, whatever is going on. So I didn't expect to get this from the show, but I feel a little less afraid of becoming a parent one day because of it, because it really does. I mean, you have a good way of shedding light on scary places, especially for me, who comes from, a divorced family. One of my biggest fears is having a child and then getting a divorce, like, of course, obviously that's what happens when you come from a divorced family. That's your biggest fear. It was a big thing that, disrupted my life. So knowing that there are options and ways to navigate this in a really beautiful way, and thinking of it like there's a potential that opens up whenever you do decide to split from your co-parent, to make it more of a tribal situation, actually increase the amount of love that happens in that child's life, especially if both parents are willing to then, or can grow into that. There's potential there, and that's really hopeful. And I think there's a lot of lack of hope when you have those dark places from your child, your inner child who sees like the really negative stuff. So thank you for shedding some light on that for me. It really did have an effect. I'm sure it will over the days to come too.
That's interesting.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
For sure.
The ceremony the other day, it was like I saw that I was going to be a mother to another little girl. And it's weird to get I don't know if you can say weird with medicine, but like it was interesting to receive a message like that when you just had to like put your kids through a separation like in the last 6 months, and like thinking about all that. So I was thinking that too, even though I am already a mother.
Yeah, the risk or whatever you want to call it. Your mind puts you in that state of fear.
Yeah. So thank you, Brandon.
Yeah, thank you both. This was a ton of fun, and I really appreciate the two of you amazing women for creating this show and having me on it. It was a lot of fun. So thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
Thanks.
Let's see. Cool. Let me hit stop over here. All right. Oh, wow. That's quick.
What does it do?
It's just done. I don't have to send anything. He doesn't have to do anything.
So weird. And it just goes
Before
to John.
We had to have to walk our guests through like a 5-minute process of sending us the file, but we figured it out this way. So thank you for your patience during that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much. I'll see you next time you're in Austin, hopefully. And happy Father's Day, since
thank you.
We're pretending it's this week.
Yeah, I actually don't even know which day it is. Is it this weekend coming up? This next weekend?
June
or when?
For a while. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
But we're going to air your show that week for Father's.
Awesome. Yeah. Very, very cool. Well, let me know as it gets closer, and I'll share it and send it out on my platforms and stuff as well.
We'll make you a little.
I just realized it's going to be a little confusing with the Game of Thrones talk at the beginning and then the Father's Day.
We'll take that out. Yeah, we'll take that out.
Oh, because of the timing.
Yeah.
Thank you both. I do really appreciate the opportunity to hang out and chat and connect. And
thank you.
Let me know for you. Thanks.
Right. Have a good rest of the night. Bye.
Y'all too.
Oops. All right. Let me see. So, wow. It's awesome.
It's just done?
Yeah.
Ask John before you close it out or
on
anything.
Audacity.
Yeah.
No, it closes itself.
Oh.
It uploads to John's account.
Cool.
All right.
So last thing I said is we appreciate you.
That's funny. All right. So you want to act like you just got off?
Yeah, that's why I'm telling you what I just said at the end.
Oh, I thought you were saying because he was teaching us about appreciation.
Well, that's why I said it, but just so you know, that was also the last thing I said.
Okay.
Come off that energy. I said, we appreciate you. Wow. He was really cool. I'm glad you set that up. I think he has so much to offer anyone listening.
Yeah, he's got a high calling on his life when it comes to fatherhood and teaching, a healthy masculine energy. And it's definitely, you see it when you look at him,
Yeah, I think men need somebody to say it's okay to go there. So that's pretty cool. He's being that he's being a bridge, as I like to say.
Yeah. So what do you have for magic?
For my magic trick today, nothing really related to this episode. I know we sometimes like to relate it to the episode, but this time it's just a tool that I would say is probably one of the at least top 5 tricks or maybe mantras, if you want to call it, in my life that have allowed me to have successful connections and networking, that have allowed me to, and that's just not just in business life, but also in my romantic life, in my friendships, in my my life with my parent, or my relationships with my parents and such. It's to be interested, not interesting. So that's the mantra, if you want to call it a mantra, or the phrase, or that's the tool right there. Be interested, not interesting. And what I mean by that is that instead of constantly worrying about if you're enough, are you well groomed enough? Are you lovable enough? Are you interesting enough? We all have these worries of not being enough, right? So when it comes to conversation, we're worried we're not going to have something interesting to say enough, and we're sitting there scrambling and sometimes jabbering on about whatever we can to fill the space with anything that we think might make us sound like we have something going for us or is going to impress the person we're talking to. And we're there scrambling for sometimes even just to fill space because we're worried, we're scared about that open space and what silence means in a conversation, which is kind of a whole nother thing. But it's a matter of being enough there as well. Like, is your presence enough? Maybe you feel like it's not, and you have to fill that void or that space in a conversation with words, which I would say you don't. So all that to say that people you're talking to are not worried about what you're saying as much as they're worried about what I just explained. They're worried about you hearing what they have to say and being interested in them. So if you can flip the script and actually find something about them to be interested in, and you can start that with little icebreaker openings, to figure out, I don't know, where they're from and talk about them. I mean, you could start with the weather, and people will give you hints of something about them because, like I said, everyone's worried about being interesting to some degree or another. And it's pretty easy to get good at those icebreaker or those real, easy surface level questions that you can ask someone to be interested in who they are, where they came from, what their background is, what they do for a living, whatever it is, to get them talking, and then find something that does actually genuinely spark your interest. It's important that it's genuine, that you're not just feigning interest, but to find something that maybe you guys maybe you have something in common, but it doesn't need to be in common. It can just be something you can be interested in for the time you're spending in that conversation, and go off of that. And as you do this, you will realize that the conversation feels super fluid because the person suddenly feels acknowledged. They feel seen and heard. And especially if you can make them feel clearly seen and heard, like that they really came across, articulate and got their authentic self out there in front of you, and you accepted it and were interested, that's making someone feel wanted and loved when you do that, essentially. They can really walk away from the conversation going, wow, I've never had a better conversation than that one. I mean, this literally happens. I've never had a better conversation than I did with Jade, And the fact of the matter is, Jade didn't even say anything about herself almost. She just asked me questions, and it's because they felt seen and heard. That's what a good conversation makes to the normal person, I don't want to say normal, to the average person. We are all just looking to be seen and heard. Not just the average person, to every person, I'd say. We're all just looking to be seen and heard. So if you can hold that type of space for someone and even draw that out of maybe someone who's slightly introverted or isn't, any kind of conversational expert, you will make connections, deep and authentic connections with people that can have mutual benefit. You'll be able to benefit their lives. They'll be able to benefit your lives. These are how those connections are made. And I'm sure you've heard the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I'd alter that slightly to be, it's not what you know, it's who you've made meaningful connections with. And I think being interested instead of interesting is a really good mantra to get you in that space.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to listen to this a few times. So I'm going to soak that in a little bit more. My magic trick is pertaining to this episode, if you can allow it to be for you. So I'm gonna record this later and send it to John because I had a really rough weekend. There was I literally had no time. We rehearsed Friday, and then I had no time this weekend to do. I haven't showered. I've barely washed my face. So I'm going to record it tomorrow and send it to him so he can piece it in. So he'll piece it in right there. So it is going to be the Ho'oponopono, which is the I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. So if you want to just say a response
so
now.
what do you think it's going to end with?
Those 4 words.
Oh, you don't think you're going to give an explanation?
I'm going to give the history and the explanation, and then I'm going to end with that because I'm going to say it, and then I'm going to have them picture someone in front of them, and I'm going to say it again.
Okay. And give me just a rundown of what's the practice do for you?
It heals yourself in forgiving.
So you're putting out the energy you need to receive. Mm-hmm. Okay. I like that. It feels like you're saying, it really feels like you're putting out the energy that you need to receive.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
You attract what you put out.
How often should I be doing this?
Oh, I'm going to try to start doing it daily in the little occurrences. So anytime you feel upset, it's a useful practice. And like I was saying in the history, this guy did it daily and he experienced so much healing. So yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Power of words.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We hope you found this conversation as comforting as we both did. Mm-hmm. If so, please share it with your friends and family. This would mean so much to us. And also remember, you can go to our Instagram page at the Majic Hour to ask us or any of our future guests a question. Talk to you guys next week. Until then, be a light.